File 02, the Gala Veto Dossier Briefing. Power in social circles is rarely held by the truly powerful. It is held by the self-appointed gatekeepers. These are the individuals who control the lists, dictate seating arrangements, and decide, often without any formal authority, who belongs and who does not. For 4 years, a woman we will call Renata had appointed herself as the supreme gatekeeper of our social circle. This is the file of her stepdaughter, Elise, and the night an entire ballroom watched Renata's institutional appointment expire in real time. In the world of high society philanthropy, arrogance is a structural defect. It relies on the assumption that you are the only one capable of maneuvering in exclusive spaces. This case serves as a masterclass in the difference between social proximity, the borrowed power of sitting near the throne, and institutional equity, which is the power to actually dictate the progress. Act 1. My stepmother, Renata, came into my father's life when I was 19. She was, and I say this with clinical accuracy, extraordinarily skilled at social positioning. She possessed an instinctive radar for which galas to attend, which charities to chair, and exactly which names to drop at which dinners. More importantly, she understood the art of the invisible exclusion. She could erase someone from a social circle without ever leaving a fingerprint. When the Meridian Children's Hospital Gala announced its annual event, the city's most visible philanthropic evening, Renata decided I was an obstacle to her own social branding. She personally contacted the events committee, claiming I was traveling internationally and unable to attend. I was not traveling. I was 40 minutes away in my apartment, living my life. She then had my name removed from the digital guest list and forwarded me a calendar invitation to a separate family dinner on the same evening, ensuring I would have no reason to cross-reference the gala's official schedule. It was precise. It was clean. It was a surgical strike designed to keep me out of the room while she performed her role as the philanthropic heir apparent. What Renata didn't know, and hadn't bothered to investigate, was what I had been doing for the previous 18 months. Act 2. The Meridian Children's Hospital had a desperate problem. Their pediatric oncology wing was underfunded, understaffed, and operating out of a crumbling building from the 1980s. It was scheduled for permanent closure in 14 months, unless a major donor committed to a total renov. I had been in quiet, high-level conversations with the hospital's development board since the previous spring. I wasn't operating as a socialite or as someone's daughter. I was operating as an independent entity. We had reached a funding agreement that was significant enough that the board had asked me to be formally acknowledged as the guest of honor and lead donor at the gala. My name had been on the internal program since August. The events committee Renata had called. They had absolutely no authority to remove a board-acknowledged honoree. They had simply told her what she wanted to hear to end the call, while I remained on the permanent ledger. My invitation was not on the digital list because it was issued directly by the board on heavy stock paper and sent to my home address. I RSVP'd the same AF. Renata was playing a game of social optics, but I was playing a game of institutional equity. I had purchased a seat at the table that no gatekeeper could. Act 3. I arrived at the Meridian Gala at 8:17 p.m. Renata was already there, holding court near the champagne display in a burgundy gown I recognized from her social media posts. She saw me the moment I crossed the threshold. The expression that moved across her face in that instant was, there is no other word, architectural. It was a full structural collapse occurring in real time behind perfect makeup. She started moving toward me, likely intending to create a scene or demand an explanation, but the momentum of the evening was already beyond her control. At 8:22 p.m., the MC approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin the evening's program, the board of the Meridian Children's Hospital would like to welcome tonight's guest of honor and our lead foundation donor, without whom this new wing would not be possible, Miss Elise Carver. The applause was immediate and deafening. I walked to the front of the room, passing Renata, who stood 12 feet away, frozen in the middle of the aisle. I did not look at her. I thanked the board, I thanked the medical staff, and I spoke for 4 minutes about the children on the ward. When I returned to my seat, I found that Renata had retreated to the opposite, shadowed side of the room. But the trap had one final component. At 9:45 p.m., the board chairwoman took the podium again for the governance announcements, which included the appointment of new advisory board members. Renata's name had been submitted by my father for one of those seats. The chairwoman paused, looked at her notes, and said, "After review, the board is declining to ratify one of the submitted nominations this evening. We'll be in touch with the relevant party privately." The room speculated. By midnight, the speculation had turned to fact. Act 4. I stayed until the event closed. I said goodnight to the board, spoke with the surgeons, and signed the ceremonial rendering of the new wing. Renata left at 10:15 p.m., looking diminished. She and my father had a significant argument in the car. My father called me the following morning to apologize. He didn't know the full scope of her interference, but he apologized for not paying attention. I told him, "I didn't need you to see it. I just needed the board to." The advisory board seat was never offered to Renata. Within 6 months, she resigned from 2 of the other charity committees she sat on, likely realizing that the institutional dynamics had shifted away from her favor. Jess's verdict. What Renata failed to understand is a fundamental principle of social architecture. Gatekeeping only works when you are the highest-ranking entity at the gate. The moment someone with more institutional authority enters the equation, the gatekeeper becomes entirely irrelevant. Renata spent years collecting social proximity to power, proximity to names, and proximity to rooms. I spent 18 months building actual equity in those same rooms. Proximity can be rescinded at a moment's notice. Equity cannot. The most devastating public humiliation is never the dramatic, screaming confrontation. It is the quiet, institutional one, where the establishment itself confirms, in front of witnesses, that you were never as important as you believed yourself to be. Remember that. The archive does not forget, and neither do I. This has been another Revenge Jess cold-hearted case. Subscribe for more cases.